Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure it's not a surprise to the majority of my audience, but there's been a controversy around the lack of men's literature in brick-and-mortar stores. It's a topic I haven't taken the time to make a video on. The main reason is, I don't buy my books from box stores. Then I had to stop and ask myself, why? Why don't I buy my books from Barnes & Noble? Well, because the books I want are easier to find online. There's very little geared towards my interest in those stores anyway. So why are there no books for men like me in the most popular bookstores? I know I'm going to get people pointing at the manga section and saying, there it is. And I mean, you're not entirely wrong, but it's kind of sad, not to mention bad for society, that the only books men want to read are from another country. A major culture, talking about the West, doesn't publish fiction for its men. When I was younger, I spent a lot of time after school in Walden Books and Books A Million, stores which no longer exist. I'm showing my age a bit here. These stores are where I bought most of the books I read in high school, from novels to cookbooks to manga. Yes, I bought a lot of manga when they were sub $5 a book. At the time, I remember there being a lot of books for men. In fact, the entirety of the fantasy and science fiction sections were broadly considered men's books. Now it's not so much the case. I've seen a lot of articles pushed out in recent years saying things like, men don't read as much as women, and women make up 80% of the fiction market, and men should learn to read new fantasy. It would almost lead you to believe that men aren't welcome in literary spaces, at least in the West. Or they're simply not interested. I find it hard to believe that the gender who reveled in Dungeons & Dragons before the pandemic, fantasy card games, and Japan's primary export of books filled with questionably dressed women and fantasy worlds full of game mechanics wouldn't also crave the theater of the mind that is novels. This isn't even mentioning that men are by far the more solitary of the genders, and reading is a loner's hobby. But perhaps it's all by design. I'm not going to sit here and say there's a shadowy group of people with a singular goal of excluding men from reading. I'm going to sit here and say there are multiple groups who are working together for various reasons to cater to one group of readers. At least, that's my hypothesis. But with so much money to be made in entertainment, why exclude nearly half of the human race? Well, I have a theory. I think they're trying to control the literature supply. The first thing we need to ask is why would they want to do this? The next is, how are they doing this? And the third question is, how's it going? So let's look at why they'd want to control the literature supply. There are those who will claim they're not, that such things would require a monopoly, and men get published all the time. We need to clarify some things. First off, yes, men still get published. Not as often as women, but they still do. Secondly, yes, there is still fiction put out geared towards men. Most of it was written in the last century, and honestly, how many special editions of Lord of the Rings does the average man need? Our complaint is, where is the recent fiction for men who don't lean towards California politics so hard they wet themselves when seeing a Tesla? I honestly can't name any from the big publishing houses, and that's the point. You can't go too far on BookTube without seeing someone talk about some insider telling all, letting us know that if your skin color and dangly bits aren't correct, the big houses don't want to hear from you. They know the type of books they want, and yours isn't it. But why would they want this? Well, market capture. I'm not going to say that everyone working in the publishing industry supports the politics and literature being pushed. Some of them are just profit-minded, which has led to a horizontal monopoly. The money-minded in business are focusing on the biggest sellers, i.e. romance, and its thousands of out-of-wedlock children. Women tear through romance books like men used to tear through video games. They have for as long as I can remember. The money-minded don't want to settle for second place, even if catering to second or third place would net them arguably more by virtue of lowering the competition. They want a piece of the biggest pie. You see this in video games too, and why soon most are going to be $80 to $100 a game. But let's have a better, more historical example. When World of Warcraft was popular, every studio sunk tons of money and man-hours into making the WoW killer. They saw the massive revenue Blizzard was bringing in from those sweet, sweet monthly subscriptions, and they couldn't help themselves. As a result, there were hundreds of abandoned MMOs, all with similar mechanics and grind-obsessed gameplay. Then the market shifted to hero shooters with loot boxes. Then every studio, completely forgetting the national debt levels of money they'd spent on failed MMOs, jumped on the trend, leaving other genres completely unfulfilled. Gambling has always been profitable. Not one of these executives looked towards the abandoned markets and said, "You know, everyone's gone. We could just be the only game in town and make bank." They said, "Look at the fat stacks Marvel Rivals is making. We need in on that." Then many put out hero shooter games, completely ignoring the other genres which made them popular in the first place. The love of money is not just the root of all evil. It's apparently the root of many stupid business decisions. This isn't the only group that wants control. There's a second group that worm-tongued their way into power right alongside the greedy. The ideologues. You don't have to look far to see it. It's like kerning. Once you're aware of it, you see it everywhere. Some of us are a little extra sensitive to it these days. If you don't see it at this point, please go back to enjoying your lunch of crayons, or simply stop lying to people. It's no secret that sometime in the mid-aughts, and probably even earlier, you start to see a slanted view of real-world politics creeping its way into our entertainment. Little jabs at political parties, the questioning of your intelligence if you oppose certain issues, and the portrayal of certain groups as beneath the capabilities of others. Which is exactly the opposite face they were presenting for a decade or two. The thing is, this kind of worked. For a while, at least. If you've turned on a TV or binged a modern show on a streaming service, or actively read modern books, you've seen it. Every show looked more and more like a California political science major wrote it. Every book has lines you weren't allowed to cross. Certain types always had to be villains. If you didn't agree, you got shut down by the, at the time, popular methods. So why would people do this? These aren't the folks driven by money. They have a use for it, sure, but it's not their end goal. They wanted to have a monopoly on culture. The idea is, most people get their ideas and arguments from the media they consume, whether it's books, TV, social media, or the news. If you can control what is allowed in these spaces, you can control people's behavior, or at least the information they have access to. You see this throughout history. Without getting into the most famous example, countries and powerful groups have gone to great lengths to keep certain ideas out of people's heads. The Cathar Crusades, the Soviet Iron Curtain, and China's Great Firewall are and were methods of controlling information in order to control people. Such things can work in the short term, though are not usually successful in the long term. The point here is not to argue if such things are good or bad, if censorship in any form can be good, or if you should control what the masses have access to. We're just talking about what has happened. Moving on to the how. How does one small group control the flow of literature? It's honestly not as hard as you might think. Every system has bottlenecks, a spot where the flow of things can be most easily impacted. Publishing has a few of these, from agents to editors to publishing directors. All you have to do is get people of similar ideology who want to use that ideology to control what products can get through into positions of power and influence. Just surrounding the normies and being verbose about your ideas is good enough to sway most people. We are social creatures after all. Most people don't want to rock any boats they don't have to. Make everyone in the industry either firm believers or believing the industry is run by firm believers, and you have your lock. It's not a conspiracy. These people didn't coordinate to get where they are. Most decided they want a hand in what got made. They wanted the power to prevent counter ideas, or just stuff they didn't like. They entered the industries and climbed as high as they could. Then, when they realized they were surrounded by like-minded individuals, they did what most do in that situation. They became gatekeepers. It's similar to what happens when you hire a bunch of people who steal to run a restaurant or box store. All of them will steal. They will coordinate to make it easier to steal, and they will not report the others because they all steal. The employees didn't make plans with the other employees to get a job at this location so they could steal together. They just have overlapping interests and so act upon them. It's not even that hard to spot. If you're old like me and remember the fallout of Gamergate, some names probably come to mind. Without naming names, many of the people that kicked the hornet's nest that was gamers went on to consult for major studios on how to fix the problems they saw in gaming. This led to the studios making content decisions they would not have otherwise made. But more importantly, it led to them making hiring decisions they would not have otherwise made. The next 10 years saw one of the greatest fall-offs in quality that gaming has ever suffered. While publishing has not had its own Gamergate yet, it's certainly doing its best to make one. I've noticed a lot of YouTubers and pundits making the same movements that preceded Gamergate. It's not helped by the fact that the ideologues have lost control over one of the biggest platforms. While freeing one platform from their control might not sound like a big win, it's actually bigger than you may think. But we'll get back to that later. So how did the ideologues get the money-minded to follow along? A lot of it has to do with the speed at which communications technology spreads. When social media was finding its feet, it was most common in urban areas. This is because this is where the best internet infrastructure was. It's easier to set up in condensed areas. Not everyone in the cities is of the same mindset, but their opinions do tend to slant in one direction, just like rural areas tend to slant in the opposite. This gave the ideologues the backing they needed to convince the money-minded that their way was the best way. Many of you will remember the years of screaming, "Twitter isn't real life," as we watched industries produce movies, books, and games based solely on Twitter feedback. When you have the biggest presence on things like social media, it's easy to leverage that in your arguments. Things like sock puppeting and brigading were often used in those days. All the ideologues had to do was rile up the like-minded, show the results to the money-minded, and they made it look like they had the popular position, and popularity has always been easy to turn into money. This was also a more peaceful time. It's hard to explain the early internet to those who only know the raging beast it has become. The early internet was kind of whimsical, in a European folklore way. It was both kind of goofy and at times needlessly dark and weird. It was a time of exploration and giving the benefit of the doubt. Then the internet learned to hate. The hate wasn't there, or at least it wasn't anywhere near what it was represented to be. The ideologues needed an other. Someone they could point at and collectively scream, "Bad." And they found it. Again and again and again. They othered everyone who didn't adhere to their strict, ever-changing standards and beliefs. We're still coming out of that time. Luckily, they've started eating their own, as ideologues often do. It's even worse since they lost their horizontal monopoly on social media. So let's take a look at how it's going. Why is losing one of the biggest platforms such a problem? Well, competition. When you have a horizontal monopoly, you need everyone to work in tandem. It's like a dam. If one segment gives out, all the water behind the dam escapes, and probably floods a town or three. It's like price fixing, a more common reason for a horizontal monopoly. If one guy decides he wants a bigger slice of the pie and undercuts everyone else will either do the same or lose business. Elon's purchase of Twitter, now X, had a huge impact on culture, but we can't discount what preceded it. I'm pretty sure Twitter before the crackdowns was not the same Twitter we have today. Once Elon opened the gates to everyone again, those exiled to the digital wilderness came back, and just like locking up a minor offender, they were more radical for their time away. Being outside the mainstream, they'd taken time to sharpen their skills, nurse their grudges, and learn a new hatred for those who'd exiled them in the first place. Now X is a battlefield. Everyone fighting, screaming, and trying to bury each other in the digital bloodbath. Gone are the days of the silly cat videos and dark, edgy humor. Well, those things are still there, they've just been weaponized against one side or the other. This isn't just confined to X. As stated before, competition is a major factor. Now that one platform allows other voices, the others have to ease up or they won't be as interesting. People are naturally drawn to conflict. It's one of the necessary elements to any good story. When one platform has all the conflict, people are going to flock to it, like a burning building. Most won't charge in, but they're certainly going to be paying more attention to the flaming building than those around it who are mundane for not being on fire. This opens the floodgates for voices who weren't being heard to now be heard, and authors who previously were turned down to find audiences anew. This puts those who want to make money at odds with those who just want ideological control. When everyone is producing the same stuff, it's easy to keep the profit-minded focused on building better things. But when other things are getting more eyes, it's hard to keep them on the rails, and the arguments as to why they need to stay on task get harder to make. We're starting to see this in publishing. We've seen such priceless articles as 50% of books sell less than a dozen copies. There's an argument as to whether this is true or not. I've seen claims that the average for the publishing houses could be as high as 2,000 copies per book, but that's still not great considering other expenses. Most books retail for about $15 to $30 the last time I was in a bookstore. That's a gross income of about $30,000 to $60,000 before the store, distributor, and publishing houses get their cut. It's no wonder most authors published by the big houses never see more than their advances. As an indie, selling 2,000 copies at launch would probably be a good thing. For the massive machine that is modern publishing, it could easily be a disaster. The bigger the machine, the more money it needs to function. Take a look at modern entertainment. Disney is constantly cranking out flops to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. They flop because no one asked for a live-action remake, rehash, or reimagining of classic animation from 20 to 80 years ago. Then some $20 million film like Godzilla Minus One comes along, makes what Disney spends on a movie, and is profitable. Hollywood has gotten too bloated for its own good. It's not just Hollywood. Traditional news is losing out to random guys with video cameras and laptops. Publishing houses won't put out your book if you don't have a big enough following, because they can't be profitable and promote your work if you don't already have enough fans. It doesn't matter how good your work is. They've gotten used to not having to market too hard. Which kinda defeats the point of publishers, if I'm going to be honest. These corporations keep getting bigger. but so do the resources, demands, and stability requirements. Eventually, you lose your lunch to the smaller but faster competition. That is, unless you somehow get legislation for useless license requirements passed. You don't have to look far these days to see businesses shutting down. It's the natural end result of bad models and growth for growth's sake. All these giant box stores that were previously destroying the small stores are themselves being destroyed by Amazon, who is losing the gains it had because people are simply broke. Honestly, I could go on, but that's not the point I'm trying to make in this video. You're already seeing cracks in the publishing world. Like it or not, smaller producers have struck out to compete with the big boys. They aren't bringing in the same money, but they're leaner, fresher, able to do more with less. It's happening in every field, and it will happen with books. Time for something unpleasant. Romantasy is probably not going to die anytime soon. It has its hordes of thirsty women ready to snap up whatever the genre pumps out, no matter what we think of it. That said, the men's section has been abandoned. Yes, things look as bleak as a modern trad pub sci-fi. But it's a matter of perspective. It means there's a market for those willing to go the other way and work through the constant stream of negativity. It's inevitable that the book market will expand once again to include what men want to read. If there is a demand, it will be met. We've seen this in history. It's just a matter of breaking through, of giving men what they want. It will require hard work, but no ideology stays in power forever. No one keeps the masses from what they want for long. The US government tried to ban alcohol, and even with underhanded tactics and poison, couldn't stop it. ISIS had to relent on a cigarette ban they imposed because it nearly got them deposed as soon as they took power. The point is, where there are those looking for something and those willing to provide it, it's only a matter of time. Good luck, everyone.